Hey everyone, welcome to Chapter 5. Before I get into the material, a major announcement. I have made a return to the game of baseball. I hope you were sitting down. I'm sharing this with everyone because even though I know you probably don't care, but it's a big deal to me. I haven't played baseball in more than 20 years, for the most part. I mean, I played a couple times with some friends, but I played all growing up. I love the game. I made a return. I tried out for a team, a men's league here in Minneapolis, St. Paul, and made the team, thankfully. And then I played my first game last week, and I went 1 for 1. So I'm batting 1,000 right now. I have the highest batting. I don't like to brag, but I have the highest batting average in the world. There is no one in the world who has a higher batting average than me right now. It was an infield hit, but don't tell anybody about that because in the box score it just looks like a hit. I don't even know how I got an infield hit because I can't run. I run the 40-yard dash in probably like 15 seconds. I have no idea he didn't even throw it. So I literally, I didn't even ask. I don't even know what happened. I just know it was a hit. So maybe he just felt sympathy for me and just decided not to throw the ball to first base. I don't know. But anyways, I like to break up the monotony by talking about my personal life. You're probably all sitting there going, "Why is this guy talking to us about this stuff right now?" But anyways, this is chapter 5. This is gonna be the last lesson before exam 1. So that's it. This is gonna be it. I mean, you read those first 5 chapters. You'll have watched all 5 of these lessons, right, on the first 5 chapters, and you'll be ready to take the exam. You know, study hard, and you'll be fine. You do have 3 in-term exams, as I've already explained, plus a final, so you'll actually take 4 exams in the class. But of the 3 in-term exams, you do get to drop 1. Now, that doesn't mean you should blow any of them off. You should study hard for all of them and take all of them, because if you do, you'll do better on the final. Okay, so let me know if you have any questions on the exam or anything else related to the course. You've got your first, depending on when you're listening to this, I mean, the first brief papers coming up. So just stay on top of the game. Make sure you're following the syllabus, the schedule in the syllabus. And then definitely let me know if you have questions. Let me know if you want to meet during my virtual office hours or by appointment. I'm very flexible. Just shoot me an email. We can set up a Skype time to talk. So just let me know. So chapter 5 deals with visual images. We're going to talk about movies, photography, television. And it's kind of an interesting chapter because it takes us through kind of some of the history. But if you take a step back initially and just think about the power of visual images and the extent to which they shape our perception of reality. It's very interesting, and we are surrounded by visual images, right? We're bombarded with images from photographs, from TV, from movies. I mean, we are constantly looking at something now on our computers, or, you know, this whole idea of screen time. And by the way, not everyone thinks that this is a good thing. I mean, there are plenty of scholars doing research that say that this is not necessarily a good thing, that it's kind of rewiring our brains so that we don't concentrate as well on things like reading, right? Some people think that that all this screen time could contribute to things like attention deficit disorder. Nothing conclusive as far as I know. I mean, that's not my area, but there are people who have speculated on that. This is a quote from page 124. "The photographic lens has long defined the linear narrative of visual storytelling, and recent changes with digitization allow visual media to render and create realities even more vividly." So just think about the difference between looking at a still photograph on the one hand and, you know, watching a 3D movie on the other hand, right? I mean, it's a pretty different experience. But visual images are very powerful and very pervasive. Photography performs the survey. Remember we talked about those functions of the mass media, those 4 functions. So you could argue that photography performs a surveillance function by kind of telling us what's going on, and also a cultural transmission function. It teaches us about our culture. While words might provide the narrative, photos confirm its truth. And you've all heard the expression, a picture is worth 1,000 words. And if that's true, then we are really we're really experiencing, I guess, a type of information overload then, with all the visual imagery that we take in on a daily basis as humans living in the 21st century. So let's go through a really brief history of photography. The book goes through more detail, but Leonardo da Vinci discussed the camera obscura, which was very interesting and very significant. This is back in the 15th century, and this is from Wikipedia. The camera obscura is an optical device that led to photography in the camera. It consists of a box or a room with a hole in one side. Light passes through the hole, strikes a surface inside, and then produces an image. And this is what it looks like. I just found this image on the internet. If you search camera obscura, you'll find all kinds of interesting renditions. But you can see the light kind of passes through that hole in the side. It hits a surface, and then it projects an image from above. So you can actually someone could actually watch that. And this is back in the 15th century, several hundred years ago. And then considerable time elapsed. I mean, there were other inventions that kind of led to photography, but we really start to things start to progress very significantly in the 19th century. We have a man named Joseph Nipsey. I don't know. There are a lot of names in this chapter that I don't have any idea how to pronounce, to be perfectly honest with you. But in 1827, he used an asphalt-like material that hardened after exposure to light and created a picture. So this is arguably the first picture. And then in 1839, a Frenchman named, I'm going to try to pronounce this in French. I did take 3 years of French in school, but Louis Daguerre, I have no idea if I'd probably get laughed at by someone who actually knows how to speak French. But he unveiled the daguerreotype, which was a method for creating a positive image on a metal plate. And then over the next 100 years, you had a lot of different technological advancements which reduced exposure time and improved image photography. One guy that I want you to know about is Matthew Brady. This guy rose to fame in the 19th century for a bunch of photographs of famous people. Like he had some famous photographs of Abraham Lincoln, but also photographs of the Civil War, right? And this is his famous photograph. This is a very famous photograph by Matthew Brady of the Michigan Infantry. This is another one of his famous photographs of the Civil War. This is of casualties. Now, Brady, as the book discusses, was controversial because one of the things that he did, which a lot of people disagreed with, is he would position and kind of pose the bodies in these casualty photos. So he would take dead bodies and pose them, and people, or position them, maybe is a better word, and some people thought that was problematic from an ethical perspective, and many people still do. Speaking of ethics, and there are all kinds of really interesting ethical questions that are raised by photography, right? I remember when I was living in Qatar, one of the I had never really thought about this before, but it's against the law in Qatar to include passersby in your photos. So if you take let's say you're walking in the mall and you want to take a picture of your kid or your wife or your husband or whatever, or your friend, you snap a picture, you have to make sure that there's no one in the background, basically, unless they've consented. Now, it's not, to be honest with you, it's not really enforced. Okay, I never saw any police. I took many photographs, and to be honest with you, I wasn't very good about that. I would just take pictures of my kids, and if there was somebody in the background, whatever. Nobody ever came and looked at my camera, but that's kind of an ethical question, right? Is it okay to take pictures of, you know, people in the background and maybe they don't want to be in your picture, right? It reminds me also, I'm just remembering this now, I don't know if you guys are fans of the show Seinfeld. I know that it was really popular like before your time, but I mean the reruns are still on. I mean it's in syndication. But there was the episode of when George Costanza, I'm trying to think, he was in he was in I'm a huge Seinfeld fan, but he was in the background. He went to like interview for a job, and he's interviewing with like the head of the company, right? Like the CEO. And he looks at the CEO's desk and there's a picture and George Costanza's in the background of he like apparently it was like on a beach vacation and they happened to be there at the same time or whatever. And anyways, the guy he's interviewing with is remembering that, man, there was this really, you know, nerdy, dorky dude, this guy at the beach that day. I remember him, and he was all, you know, he was fat and he was goofy looking, and George is like thinking to himself, that's me. And so what he does, and he doesn't want his boss, his potential boss, to figure it out. So what he does is he takes the photograph and he tries to have himself removed digitally. It didn't work. It's a long story. Go watch the episode. It's very funny. But anyways, I digress. So photojournalist Rita Leisner, this is an ethical question, right? She took a photo of an arrested Iraqi in 2003 who was bagged and tied by U.S. soldiers. Now, that begs the question, should she have taken the photo? Another question, does the picture tell, quote, the truth? What are the implications? I mean, some people, from one perspective, you might argue that this kind of treatment, you know, even in a war, is unethical, and American people and other people deserve to know what was happening. From another perspective, though, somebody might argue, as some have, that this kind of thing could hurt the war effort, the American war effort, by increasing anti-American sentiment throughout the world, which is something that happened. I mean, and a lot of it was, you know, related to visual imagery, particularly when the Abu Ghraib photos were released. I mean, the opinion of America in the world really took a hit at that point. If you look at the polling data, and not just in Iraq or in the Middle East, but really all, you know, in Asia, in Europe, in Central and South America. And also even in the United States, the war effort, I mean, took kind of a hit from a public morale standpoint. By the time the war, you know, by the time initially an overwhelming majority of Americans supported the war effort, but by the end of the Bush term, Bush's second term, and really to a lesser extent the end of his first term, a lot of people had turned on the war, on that particular war effort. What about photos of deceased American soldiers? Think about that. If a soldier has been killed in the line of duty, is it ethical to take a photograph? Is it ethical to take a photograph of caskets? This was very controversial. The U.S. government did not like this. There was a military photographer who took a photograph of these caskets of these American soldiers who had been killed in the line of duty in Iraq, and they were on their way back. They were transporting the bodies back to the United States, and so he snaps a picture, and the American government was you know, irate, and they tried to ensure that these photos were not released. There was a lawsuit, and then ultimately the photo, or there were actually multiple photos, they were released to the public. But you know, again, that begs, it's an ethical question. If we were in class right now, we might discuss it and maybe have a debate about this. But you can just kind of think of that, think for yourself. I mean, do you agree that should be, that it's okay to for these photos to be released? Because people need to see kind of the effect of the war, what's happening, that there are Americans who are dying, in addition to, obviously, Iraqis who are dying. But or do you think that this is something that, no, this could damage the war effort? It could damage morale. It could hurt recruiting, military recruiting. Maybe you think about it from the perspective of the families. Maybe the families just wouldn't want a photograph of their son or daughter's casket, right? So and no permission was sought in a situation like that. So these are the kinds of ethical questions that that arise. Let's think about movies for a minute. I mean, there are few things now that are as pervasive as movies from an entertainment standpoint. I mean, you're sitting around on a Friday or Saturday, what should we do? We'll go to a movie, or rent a movie, or watch a movie on Netflix, or whatever. But video recording, the kind that I'm doing right now, but in a different way, allows human activity to be recorded, obviously, and it allows movie producers to create a type of alternate reality, right? That they write up, or that screenplay writers write up, and so this is a very dominant entertainment pastime, if you will. It also helps fulfill cultural transmission functions related to the mass media. It's interesting to note, and you probably already know this, I'm sure you do, that movie scripts often draw from other sources, including books, comics, sitcoms, and sometimes even video games. Like Tomb Raider, right? So we could think of many examples of books and comics and sitcoms and video games where these things started off in one medium, and then they end up as movies. And people just love their movies. I mean, the film industry, this is from 2013, generated over $88 billion, not million, billion dollars in global revenue in 2013. That's an unbelievable number. And it's not just movie theaters. I mean, they're making money off of DVDs, Netflix, and then you have television channels that pay the movie companies to air movies, right? And people watch a lot of movies on television. You think about channels like TNT or TBS and many others. I mean, there are movies that are airing constantly in the evenings, and that generates a lot. That generates a lot of money. Do you think, this is just another discussion question if we were having a discussion, but here, just think about this. Do you think film should be considered a serious art form, such as, similar to painting, sculpture, and architecture, or is it less serious? In my classes, when I've taught this class in a traditional format, we've had some really interesting discussions. Some people are like, of course it's a serious art form. It's just as serious as painting and sculpture. And other people are like, no, that's ridiculous. Painting is high art, and movies are just kind of, a little bit lower brow, and they, the comedies and these silly movies. And so we get into these kind of sometimes passionate, heated debates. But think about what your perspective on that. A brief history of movies. Thomas Edison, who invented many things, invented the kinetoscope in 1891, and that was kind of a precursor to the motion picture viewer. He didn't patent it, however, which is just, let that be a lesson to you. If you ever invent something, you have to patent it, which just kind of means registering it as yours, so it's nobody else can use it. Or try to sell it off as their own. But that's exactly what happened. A couple of Frenchmen, I'm not even going to try to, I've already embarrassed myself once with that earlier pronunciation. But they patented a similar but more portable device in 1895, right? Very similar to the kinetoscope. And this is what it looks like from outside, but you can actually see through that hole that guy's looking in this image. You can actually see moving images through this kinetoscope. Continuing on, there is another Frenchman. You can see a lot of this is So a lot of French influence, a lot of American influence, some Russian influence, but a Frenchman named George Méliès, I don't know how to pronounce it, Méliès, I don't know, was the first to make objects suddenly appear, disappear, or change. And you might be thinking to yourself, what's the big deal with that? But that was a big deal. And he was considered a special effects pioneer, right, at that time. And he came, I mean, he was the first to do double exposure, the first to do split screen shots. So he's a major figure. And that's documented in your book there on page 128. And then in 1915, we get this film, Birth of a Nation, which some of you may have seen in some of your other classes. It's a really important film in American history. It was produced by D.W. Griffith. It's the first full-length film, the first major full-length film. Introduced a number of innovative techniques, and it was also extremely controversial. It was explicitly racist. There were many very problematic portrayals, very stereotypical portrayals, inaccurate portrayals of African Americans, and very positive portrayals of white extremist groups like the KKK, the Ku Klux Klan. And you can actually watch this. This is just a little clip, and you'll notice there are no African Americans in the movie. It's just white actors with blackface, right? But you can watch this clip. You can just click on that from the PowerPoint, or you can just type that in or copy and paste it from the PowerPoint that's posted to Canvas. And that's a little short clip of this film. And I think the entire film is available, if I'm not mistaken, on YouTube if you want to watch it. Now, it's a silent film. All of the films of this era were silent films, right? So that's something to kind of that will sort of get you at first. I mean, you're expecting dialogue because we're so used to watching films with dialogue, but for years there was no dialogue. They were silent films, right? It was very difficult from a technological standpoint. Interestingly enough, you'd think it would be by this time. You'd think, well, they've already got moving images. We can record sound, so you'd think, well, we'd be able to put them together, but it was very difficult. That went on for a number of years. In 1922, an American, Robert Flaherty, directed Nanook of the North, which is a film about Eskimos, and it's considered the first great documentary. In 1925, a Russian by the name of Sergei Eisenstein became the first movie maker to use fast cuts between scenes. Again, something that we take for granted now, but 100 years ago, or I guess 90 years ago, this was very difficult, and so this was a major accomplishment. We get color films in the 1920s. An important company, Technicolor Motion Picture Corporation, they produced a number of very important films like The Wizard of Oz and Gone with the Wind. And then finally in 1927, we get The Jazz Singer. The Jazz Singer is very important because it's the first film to use dialogue. And so that's very significant. Other key figures, Warner Brothers, they produced a number of very important. You'll notice, I mean, Warner Brothers, Disney, these are important figures even today, right? These are major media conglomerates. But Disney and Warner Brothers produced a lot of the really classic films from that early era, and they continue to produce movies today in 2015. Louis B. Mayer is an important figure. He became the VP of MGM Studios in the 1920s, and he created the Hollywood studio star system. And I want you to understand what this is. It's kind of interesting. Prior to Mayer coming along, actors and actresses were kind of just no-names. I mean, it just wasn't seen as something important. If you can try to picture this, it's kind of, from our perspective now, it's kind of crazy, because the actors and actresses are central to the movies now. They're absolutely of paramount importance. But prior to him coming along, they were not considered important. It was the movie, it was the producer, it was the screenplay, the writing, the production, and the actor was just performing a job, right? But what he did, This is very innovative. Innovative. He created personas for actors and actresses, and he, I mean, controversially, arguably unethically, he kind of lied. He stretched the truth. He falsified their biographies to make them more interesting. But in the end, he made stars out of these people. And so what happens is movie producers begin marketing movies on the basis of which actors were starring in the films. That's the system that we have now, right? I mean, it's like such and so, Castaway starring Tom Hanks, and you want to see the movie partly because of what it looks interesting, but partly because of the actor that's in it. You like Tom Hanks, and so you want to see the movie, or you like whatever that whoever your favorite actor is or your favorite actress is. And so now, I mean, you watch a movie trailer, that's very prominent, isn't it? The actor, the name, I mean, the star power, and in many cases now you have movies designed around certain actors and actresses, or screenplays kind of written for or written with certain actors and actresses in mind. The actors and actresses are getting paid tons of money. You guys hear about the A-list actors who make sometimes 10, 15, or even $20 million for shooting one movie, right? So Louis B. Myers was very innovative, and he's a very important figure. Let's think about technology. This is interesting. The movie industry initially resisted video cassette recording. They didn't like, the VCR, if you guys remember VCRs, or, VHS tapes. They didn't like that. Why not? Why do you think they didn't like it? Well, it's kind of obvious. They thought that if people could rent movies or buy movies and just watch them at home, they'll stop going to the movies. And they thought that would kill the industry. That was probably very narrow and short-sighted of them, because actually the fact that we can watch movies at home actually helps the movie industry. First of all, they make money off of that. Secondly, people still go to the movies. People still love the experience. And arguably, I mean, they go kind of, in many cases, you'll go to the movie and you'll still rent it later. I mean, people watch movies multiple times, right? Just ask me. I've watched Blue Streak about 48 times. I love that movie. People make fun of me. I love stupid comedies, and the stupider the better. So like Blue Streak is one of my favorite movies. Dodgeball is one of my favorite movies. What else? Hot Rod. Norbit. I think I'm like the only person, literally, that liked the movie Norbit. I looked at the reviews recently, and it's like, it has the worst reviews ever. I thought it was hilarious. I thought Eddie Murphy should have won an Academy Award. But anyways, that's just me. So I like to watch stupid comedies, and I'll watch them many times over. I'll sit and watch them. And I'm sure many of you are the same way. If you have a movie that you really like, you'll keep watching it. You'll rent it. You'll watch it on TV, whatever. You saw it in the theater. So it hasn't hurt. And long story short, it has not hurt. The fact that we can watch movies at home now with DVDs or with Netflix, digital technologies, it has not hurt the movie industry at all. In fact, it's helped the movie industry. Digital technologies allow filmmakers to design and populate entire realistic worlds. I'm not a big sci-fi person, but some of these sci-fi movies it's pretty incredible what they can do in terms of just creating an alternate reality, a different world. And sometimes they do. It's literally like a different world, a different planet, right? What they're able to do. I mean, I saw the movie Gravity recently with Sandra Bullock, and I'm not sure if you've seen that movie, but the imagery it's really fascinating, right? It's in outer space, and it looks completely. You'd swear that Sandra Bullock was actually out in outer space. There's a new movie that's coming out. I think it's out now, but I forget the name of it now. But it's with The Rock, and apparently like there's an earthquake or something in California or whatever. And I just saw the trailer, and I was like, whoa. I mean, that's not really an alternate world or a different world per se, but the imagery is unbelievable. I mean, I just looked at if you watch the trailer for that movie. I think it's called San Andreas. Yeah, that's what it's called. And I kind of want to see that movie. I'm not a big sci-fi guy. Although I guess that's not really. I guess that I don't know if that would. I guess that's not really sci-fi. Just it's a movie about an earthquake, but but just the imagery is pretty incredible what they're able to do with the digital technologies. Here's another question for you. Do you think streaming services like Amazon Prime, Hulu Plus, Netflix will force the absolute elimination of DVDs? Right? It's kind of the same question that people are asking about books. Do you think hardcover books will be eliminated? So, 30 years from now, are we still going to have DVDs, physical DVDs, or not? Are they just going to be like archaic, like 8-track tapes are now, sort of? That's just something to think about. What do you think? Key issues with the movie industry. Concentration of ownership. It's a key issue everywhere. We talk about concentration of ownership a lot in this class because it's relevant to all these different aspects of the mass media. This is also an issue with the movie industry, but the Supreme Court's antitrust decision of 1948 forced studios to sell their theaters, and today much more power rests with the artists making the films, especially directors and high-paid actors and actresses. So you can argue that concentration of ownership, while it's an issue, certainly with movies, and you just have a handful of companies really, but you could argue that it's less of an issue because the owners of the companies don't have as much control as they do maybe in the newspaper industry, for instance, because the directors are so powerful, the actors and actresses are so powerful. Something that people don't realize sometimes is that it can take years for a movie to actually for it to go from conceptualization, the writing process, and then to finally releasing the movie. And in some cases, just shooting the movie takes several months. And there are some movies that have taken that have been shot like over longer periods of time, basically. So it takes a long time. There's a ton of effort. If nothing else, you kind of have, even if you don't like movies or if you think they're bad or whatever, you kind of have to admire just the sheer effort that's put into a Hollywood production. It's pretty impressive, especially having seen some relatively more amateurish movies produced in Egypt. And Egypt has a major movie industry. It is the Hollywood of the Middle East, right? Cairo. But it's just there's no comparison at all with the movie industry, with Cairo's industry and Hollywood. Just no comparison. Some really good movies notwithstanding, but for the most part, it's much more amateurish, and it takes. They're much quicker in terms of just they produce a lot more movies in shorter amounts of time. Money is a key issue. The average production cost, think about this, for a Hollywood movie is now over $70 million. So actually, most films lose money. The movie industry is a high cost and high risk endeavor. You can make a ton of money like Napoleon Dynamite did. It only cost $400,000 to make Napoleon Dynamite, which is also one of my personal favorites. But it made $46 million in revenue. So, that's all just profit, basically. On the other hand, 47 Ronin, I forget who's in that. I didn't see it. But anyways, some of you probably know this, and you probably know more about movies than I do. Actually, I'm sure you do, because I don't keep up as much as well as I used to. But this is a movie that cost, I forget what the cost was. It was, I think, well over $100 million. I think maybe even more than 150. But I think your book talks about that. I'm not going to ask you how much it cost, but I do want you to know it lost a lot of money. It lost tens of millions of dollars. So if you produce a movie for $70 million, just think about that. Just an average cost, and then you grow in revenues, you get $30 million. You've lost $40 million on that movie. So very high risk, but also very high reward. Fewer people are attending movies today than 10 or 12 years ago, but box office revenues are the companies are doing just fine. And the reason why is because ticket prices have gone up. I can remember going to the theater and movies. When I was really young, I can remember I saw the movie Ferris Bueller's Day Off in the theater. I must have been like 9 or 10 years old. Um, I can't believe my parents let me see that. But anyways, that's neither here nor there. I want to say, I don't even know, but back in those days, this is like 30 years ago, the movies, it was like 2, 3, $4 to see a movie. Now you go to the theater, you're looking at $10 in some of the more, the larger cities. 9, 10, 11, sometimes $12 to see a movie, right? I'm sure my parents let me see Ferris Bueller's Day Off because I tricked them. I'm sure that's what happened. I was like, "Oh yeah, it's fine." Da, da, da. My parents at that time were, they were. I'm not gonna say they were totally new to the United States, but they were still learning. But yeah, I think I think if they knew the contents, they wouldn't have let me see that movie. And I would not let I'm very protective of my kids. My daughter's 6 and my son is 3, but I would not let a 9-year-old see Ferris Bueller's Day Off. I mean, these guys ditching school and doing all kinds of crazy stuff. But anyways, it is a classic movie though. And that's another movie that I've seen a million times, and I'm sure you have too. It's on TBS like once a week, I swear. Also, and speaking of money, DVD rentals and sales bring home the most money. So we talked about this, a few slides ago, about how they were scared initially of, people are going to be able to watch movies at home. They're not. It's going to hurt the industry. This is actually now the biggest money maker. So, there are just a lot of different ways to make money for these companies. And again, high risk, right? Because it costs so much money to produce a movie. But if you can just hit on several movies a year, you're gonna make a ton of money, and they are. They're making a lot of money. One of the things that's interesting too is digital film distribution is saving movie studios millions of dollars in distribution costs. It's just easier to send the movie off now, right, than it was, in the pre-digital age, and that's something that your book talks about. Let me see here. Yeah, let me do 2 more slides on movies, and then I'm gonna break this up into some other parts. So, movie studios, and just in terms of marketing, they seek to show as many movies in as many theaters as possible, obviously. They want to get their movies out into as many theaters as possible. About 60% of advertising spending is used up on TV ads. So when they come out with a movie, there are other ads. There's ads in magazines. You'll hear radio ads. You'll see newspaper ads, right? But the bread and butter is still the TV ad, and it's that trailer. These trailers are really well produced. In fact, the trailers are kind of, for me, the trailers are kind of annoying, because you ever see a trailer and just like, oh my god, this movie, I have to see this movie. Because they what they do is they pick the two, and I love comedies, right? I've already said that. And so they'll pick the funniest parts of the movie, right? And you're like, oh my god, this movie looks hilarious. And then you go to the movie and you're like, there were no other funny parts. That was it. The trailer, and that's their job. They're that's what they're gonna do. They're trying to get people in the seats, right? So still, 60% of ad spending is on television ads. Heavy advertising starts about 2 weeks before a movie releases, and then you start to see the stars going on all the shows, right? They make the rounds. They're on Conan and Jimmy Fallon, and it was Letterman. Letterman's not on the air anymore. So now who's replacing Colbert? is going to be coming on, I guess, in a few months here, replacing Letterman on CBS. But that's what they do. They make the rounds on these shows, and they play a little clip, and that's kind of a really key piece of advertising and marketing. And remember, going back to what we talked about with Louis B. Mayer with the star system, they don't bring the screenplay guy out. They don't bring the director out usually, unless it's a really famous director. Who do they bring out? They bring out the star. The star didn't write the movie. It's not his creative production. He's just, arguably you could say he's replaceable or she's replaceable. They could have had somebody else do the acting. But the movies are sold now on the basis of the stars. Release date timing is very important. They want to try to maximize their sales potential, and so they look to see what other big movies are being released. You don't want to release your movie at the same time as, I'm trying to think of a big movie that was released recently. American Sniper. American Sniper came out. You knew that a lot of people were going to go see American Sniper. And so probably not a good idea to come out that weekend or the weekend right after, right? So timing is kind of everything. Ethics. A lot of ethical issues, right? A lot of ethical issues. One of the ethical issues is, kind of some of the portrayals of racial groups. There's a lot of research documenting some of the problematic portrayals of certain marginalized groups in society, right? Whether it be people from other countries and how they're stereotyped, or stereotypes of women in the movies, stereotypes of certain racial groups. There's a big literature on stereotypes of African Americans. Now, some of the literature shows that things have gotten considerably better in that area with portrayals of African Americans just in the last 15 or 20 years. But there was a time when it was just overwhelmingly stereotypical and overwhelmingly negative in terms of the portrayals, Hollywood movie portrayals of African Americans. You think about religion. You think about portrayals of Islam and Muslims. That's an area of research, one of my areas of research, and these are continues to be very problematic from one perspective, right? There's a guy named a media scholar named Jack Shaheen. He actually did a 100-year content analysis where he looked at more than 900 movies that had a Muslim character. And what he found is that pretty much every single character was negatively portrayed, and it was stereotypical. It was either a terrorist or an oil sheikh or a belly dancer if it was a woman or whatever. Very stereotypical, very negative. And so you just don't see. It's like the movie reviewer, what's his name? The two thumbs up, Siskel and Ebert. This would have been Ebert, who just recently passed away, tragically. He was sick. But it was he wrote something about this, I remember several years ago, about portrayals of Muslims. He's like, it's not the problem isn't that there are portrayals of Muslim terrorists in the movies. That's fair game. There are Muslim terrorists, right? But the problem is that there are only those portrayals. So, and it's the same tired portrayal. So you never see kind of a Muslim, lawyer, or a Muslim mother, or a Muslim teacher, or whatever, or very rarely. There are some portrayals out there, but they're pretty rare. And there are other, and so a lot of people think that these are areas of concern because a lot of people learn about groups from the movies. Maybe they shouldn't. Maybe we should be reading more books. But we don't. People are watching a lot of movies. Also, and I mentioned the portrayals of women. This is also very controversial. A lot of people argue, a lot of religious groups, and then also a lot of feminist groups and feminist scholars and media scholars argue that women are portrayed in very exploitative ways, right? Sexually exploitative ways. And so the message that comes from the movie industry is that the value of the woman is what she looks like, right? And there's kind of a really problematic double standard. if you're a female actress, it's very difficult to get jobs as you get older. And there's kind of this progression. They've done studies on this. You don't have to take my word for it. If you go just do a Google, like go on to Google Scholar and read some of the research for yourself. But actresses get to, they're 25 and 30, then 35, and then they start to get around 40, 45, and it becomes much more difficult. The roles start to narrow. They're no longer, sex symbols and love interests, right? And then they get into their 50s and 60s, and it's almost impossible. Male actors, I mean, you can be 50. I mean, Brad Pitt, George Clooney, Denzel Washington. These guys are all in their 50s. And then you got the older guys that are 70 and 75. Robert De Niro. I mean, that guy is still super active. I mean, he doesn't, trust me, Robert De Niro has no problem getting movie roles. Al Pacino, I mean, you could go on and on and on. I mean, there are tons of examples. Female actresses, even like really huge actresses, it's much more difficult. Like Susan Sarandon. They did a study, somebody wrote a paper just about Susan Sarandon, about her career, because she was like a sex symbol. And then she got to be a certain age, and it was just like, it was just difficult for her to get roles. So there's kind of a double standard. There's a ton of literature on that. People raise issue with the fact that there's a lot of violence, a lot of sex in the movies. The movies are a very violent, very sexual place. That's why I say now, especially as a parent, and I was talking about, kind of the Ferris Bueller thing. But it's concerning, some of the images. And how am I going to kind of protect my kids and probably not going to be able to. They're going to see this stuff. So then, well, how do you deal with it? But they have the rating system, the warning system. You have the rated R and the rated PG-13 and so on and so forth. But a lot of kids will find ways around that stuff. Kind of maybe probably in the way that I did when I watched Ferris Bueller's Day Off. I mean, I'm sure I've tricked my parents, and to say, oh, this movie's fine, whatever. And, and that's why I think parents need to be very, diligent. Now, some people from some perspectives are like, hey, this stuff it's just a movie. I'll let my kids see whatever, and I'll just teach them about it. That's something, I've met people that have that perspective. That's not my perspective. I think that these messages can be quite harmful. I have a lot of kind of experience with the literature and we'll talk about some of the media effects theories, but people are affected by what they see in the movies and in other mass media. So this is a big concern for a lot of people. The portrayals of sex, the portrayals of violence, glorification of criminal activity, glorification of drug dealing, of whatever, pimping. I mean, there are tons of examples that we could go through, and if you think about the movies that you've seen, you'll find, I mean, I mentioned Blue Streak, which is a movie that I like, I mean, it's a funny movie with Martin Lawrence where he's a jewel thief, but you're like cheering for him. He's like the hero of the movie, and he's a jewel thief. I mean, that's his occupation. He's a jewel thief. So anyways, I mean, we could go on and on with that. Another ethical issue is the use of public domain material. The film Zero Dark 30 is an interesting example. It used audio recordings of 9/11 victims, September 11th victims, and that raises a lot of ethical questions. Do you think it's ethical for a commercial movie to use public domain audio recordings without obtaining permission, for example, from the families? Or maybe should they have to pay them royalties or not? I mean, it's public domain material, so should they have to? Those are things for you to think about. We will start part 2 of chapter 5 right here with television. Thanks for watching.